Most of us that have been following Trump and his politics for any amount of time, I think, have absolutely been aware that he is most probably and almost certainly a Russian asset. We've had different varying degrees of quality sources saying that he is very much the same. Uh, Now, different sources are coming out at different times. Again, how much credibility does that have? That's still left up to question. But if we look at it simply from a action perspective, not so much what he says, every single action of Trump's has followed the Russian agenda. And now we've seen him completely backpedal on the Ukrainian situation to the point where we've got Elon essentially saying that he will cripple Starlink, and if he cripples Starlink, he will cripple the defensive efforts of Ukraine. Both Trump, Elon, and Putler all know that. Um, I don't know how much more proof that we can handle because at the end of the day, we know that the DNC and the RNC was hacked by Russia. The DNC, a lot of that material was released through Julian Assange, and the DNC, the RNC material was never actually put out there. What they knew, how much they knew, or what they were using that information for. And I believe now when we're seeing Republican candidates standing up in town halls and basically when they're asked flat outright, are we for Ukraine or Russia? They are not able to answer. I think they have been compromised. I think they have been compromised for a long time. This is, as I've mentioned in a different TikTok, I believe, is to set up power blocks across the world, the North American power block, the Asian power block. This has all been a systematic plan that different groups like the IDU and Stephen Harper have all been following, which is to slowly dismantle Western democracies. And the best thing that they could have done is install Trump in the White House because he is going to get the job done and he is going to throw Ukraine to the wolves. All of the sacrifice of the last 3 years from Ukraine are basically going to be for nothing. And I hate that I have to say this at this point, but the reality is that's how close we are, and that is how bad the situation is with Trump. I have said for a long time that not only is he a Russian puppet, but he displays all of the signs that would lead me to believe that he could be one of the worst human beings that has ever lived on this planet. The man is a utter narcissist. I believe he is a full-blown sociopath, if not a full-blown psychopath. Yes, I know those terms are somewhat outdated, but for the general population and what I want to tell them, those are as accurate terms right now as any. So this is where we at, where we have a sociopathic narcissist, a low IQ dementia patient who's a Russian puppet, and his technical lapdog Elon Musk, who are now entwining themselves into every single avenue of government. And Trump has now laughingly, like he always does and says as a joke, for those of us that understand anything about his particular brand of mental health will understand that this is anything but a joke. That's where I'm going to end it off. If you want to come up and have a talk in the box, please come on up and I'll accept yourselves in. I'm going to leave it on that note. I do want to lay out the guidelines for the show, though. The show is all about discourse. The only way that discourse happens is if everybody is allowed to be heard. If you are not speaking, please shut your mic off. If you cannot have a civil conversations, you will absolutely be asked to leave. So we'll go from there. Treaty, what do you have to say?
I was just, I really value your perspective. I do. I respect you a lot. So I like to hear your analysis of things. And this really concerns me because I feel like I've heard, and I don't follow a lot of things beforehand, like when it comes to internationals, because I work so closely in our national situation with regards to
Yeah,
indigenous. So this is why I come to you with this question is I feel like, so Russia's a threat to our Arctic, right? And
absolutely.
what does this mean for us? And are they, I want to be prepared for something. I don't want to sit with my head in the sand and like I don't want to be doomsday neither. Do you know what I mean? And an alarmist, but I also feel like I like to know what's coming our way. And if the Arctic is really something that's desirable to Putin, then what does that mean for us? What do you think?
It means we're literally our backs are against the wall. Unfortunately, the talk about annexing us, this isn't a joke. The reality is that he is getting pitched this idea of, like I said, that, and his particular brand of, again, mental health is. I've always believed that Putler came to him going, you know what? You and I are friends. We're alike. We are powerful people. And powerful people deserve and take what powerful people deserve. And that's the all the pitch that would essentially be needed to dupe somebody like Trump with the particular brand, like I said, of mental health issues that he has. Add on top of that dementia and everything else. I mean, the man is an absolute train wreck. And how anybody can hear anything else when he speaks, I'm not exactly sure, other than willful ignorance. But as I've often said, uh, not everybody is brainwashed. A lot of people relate to him because they are him. Sparkle and shine.
I think you again nailed it right on the head. One thing I do want to add to that is, you know how he's always signing his executive orders. Trump, I'm talking about. I noticed that the pens he's using keep getting bigger and bigger, and I know from personal experience, my dad had Alzheimer's, but that's one of the first things to go is the fine motor
Mm-hmm.
skills. And that was just something I just happened to notice. It was like, wait a second, when did he start? Because he always used the Sharpies, but now he's moving to the bigger and bigger and bigger Sharpies. So I think that's a sign, a definite sign, another definite sign that, yeah, there is definitely something going on, whether it's dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever it happens to be. But I think that's just,
All right.
case in point.
All right. George Williams.
Yeah, I just first of all, I wanted to start off by thanking you for your composure and the rules that you have. I think that's appropriate. I do think it's inappropriate when people leave comments and people don't debate them. Like, in all fairness, if somebody wants my proof and then silences me, it's probably not the best way to get it. And the reason why I could come across as pretty radical and conversational is because I'm eager to hear the response. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not very smart at all, but I have been to 28 countries. I have family in Ukraine. I have family in Russia, and I have also been to North Korea. And I also know in Canada, if you haven't been outside of Canada, you will be extremely limited in this country because of our state. A lot of people in Canada, they think, oh, North Korea has the intranet, so they don't know anything. It's sad to say, but Canadian, our country, is more censored than North Korea. And if you tell Canadians that, they'll laugh at you or try to
Mm-hmm.
mock. They would not even believe you for 1 second. We have the internet. Our internet is censored. If you're not a Canadian going on the dark web, then you are more censored than the intranet in North Korea. They have less censorship on their internal internet than our internal internet.
Hmm.
So, in Ukraine, Zelensky and the government that is operating in Ukraine right now is horrible. I am definitely not an advocate for Trump by any means. And if I were to measure our own government, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a lot of Canadians don't even. Our government has been compromised since Mulrooney. Every single government has had foreign influence interfere with our government. Not a single government has been operating legally since Mulrooney. And you can just look that up from our own internal agencies. It it just it just bothers me because I see a lot of people debating, and if you're not outside of Canada, you could not even get the information or the education that you wanted to, even if you
Okay.
tried to be able to
Okay,
have.
George, can I interrupt you here?
Yes.
How does this relate back to the topic of Trump and Russia and Elon?
Yeah. So for me, it has a lot to do with the information that you have about Trump, Elon, and Russia. Can you give me supporting evidence? First of all, like I wanted to bring your debate. I wanted to know, have you been to any of these places? Have you been to Russia? And just if you can lay out, like I hear your debate, and I'm
Hmm.
interested in hearing what it is that you want to bring forward. So if you can just outline that.
Uh, at this point, that's a circular argument. Any of the things that I've said are easily provable. At the end of the day, Russia invaded Ukraine. Is that up for debate with you?
Well, clearly they did, but also Ukraine was killing Russians in Ukraine too, long before that happened.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, Desiree, what do you have to say on this?
I'm just kind of flabbergasted at the previous guest, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I have, since this whole thing started, back when he was still running and spouting his mess, before even the election, I was concerned. And then he got elected again, and my concern meter went off the charts. And I is probably one of the few Canadians who everything he said I never took with a grain of salt. I believed that he was going to follow through with everything he said. You know,
Yep,
he's a
yep,
psychopath.
yep. Well, everything, I mean, all of his actions prove one thing consistently is that Trump's only concern is Trump. And I firmly believe that the reality of his second term in, he knew he was going to jail, and the only option is president or jail. He knows that as soon as he leaves that source of power, he is done for, and he has no intention at this point of leaving that power base. The people that prop him up have no intention of having that power slip out of their grasp now because they're well aware that if they allow this to go on too much longer, their only option to gain power will be military force because every other avenue simply won't exist. It has become a numbers game. They are doing this at this time for a particular reason, and the population numbers have a hell of a lot to do with it, whether people want to admit that or not. Anthony, what do you have to say? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for letting me in. Well, I'd like to touch back on what the previous guest was saying about us being on some sort of limitation, because something I've noticed, I've been watching this show going on now for a little while, and when you look up at the top at how many people are in here, it's 46, 50, 52, 46. And people are tapping, people are sharing. I've been sharing out this link and telling people all over the place to come here. And people that usually come here all the time, like follow me, when I say follow me, come watch this, they'll come. It's not happening. The message isn't getting to them. I'm getting messages, but well, I didn't get anything. And I've got screenshots of all me sharing this live. And they're not getting the message.
Right.
So we're being suppressed. This is not only happening here, it's happening on Facebook, Instagram, and X. And they have the ability, I believe, to control the narrative, to be able to say who sees what and who doesn't see what based on their data collected on citizens, both Canadian and American. They use AI to go through it and find out who's cognitively impaired, who's uneducated, and they target those people because they're the easiest people to coerce and to trick. And that's what I believe happened in the first election. They completely targeted the uneducated people in the United States. They went after the cognitively impaired based on data they collected, and that violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I believe that's happening right now in Ontario, and we are being suppressed to try to stop the Conservative Party from getting in power. And our message just isn't getting out. We're getting like little views and just handful of stuff. I used to get some of my videos, I would get like 25,000 views. And now I'm getting like 50, 20. If it's about Doug, 20, 50. If it's about my dog, thousands. It's
Yeah.
something's just doesn't smell right. We need a social media platform in Canada that is Canadian, that is governed by a group of people, not with the government, or maybe a little bit of both, to make sure it's legit, not interfered with any foreign body controlling what we're saying. Because we have charter and civil rights that allow us to say what we want to our politicians online when they're asking us questions, and nobody has the right to stop us from doing that. I filed a complaint with Elections Canada about this and a human rights complaint against Facebook.
Right.
So you guys are
I'm done.
talking about such big social enterprises that you're missing the scope that there's tons of no censorship on tons of apps.
Which apps are those, True North?
You can go on Discord, and that's completely open to anybody. There's communities that you can join. You can go on Reddit.
But one of the reasons we at Beaver Politics operate our platform the way that it is because we want to hear from all sides of the opinion so that everybody can hear it. And I often bring in somewhat dissenting voices because I want to have an open line of communication, that it simply isn't an echo chamber of Beaver Politics voices or regulars on Beaver Politics. That's why I have different groups of people and try to have different guests on the show, because we want to hear their ideas, where their ideas are coming from, how their ideas are formulated. But I also want to bring it back onto topic here. Tapping is clapping, sharing is caring. Thanks everybody for joining in. If you're just joining the show, I am Mr. Radical, your one-stop shop for atheism and politics here on Beaver Politics. The show is radicalized. Tapping is clapping, sharing is caring. Beaver Politics is about open discourse. Everybody, please have your mics off if you're not speaking. We want to give everybody a chance to voice their opinion. And Treaty Birder, let's bring you back into the conversation here. And I think we can't ignore what is happening with the Ukrainians, because ultimately I think what happens in Ukraine is going to decide a lot of what happens afterwards in the next 2 to 3 years.
Zelensky just bought a big ass yacht.
Uh, yeah, so I'm going to mute you here for a second here. I'm going to come back to you. That was a senseless statement. I've yet to see anybody prove any of that type of nonsense. But Treaty Birder, can we have you back in?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't even know what to think. You know what concerns me about all of this is I'm seeing that when I'm not in this community of um, think tanking and talking about these issues with this connection and community we've created here in Beaver politics and on TikTok, when I'm out in the world with my other colleagues and stuff, there's so many people that aren't paying as close attention as we are. And it's that really concerns me. And I understand where it comes from, because I do know though that they kind of pay attention but not as closely. And I feel like some of them are going to be surprised. And then on the flip side, it sometimes make me feel like, are we the crazy ones? but but
Right.
I know we're not. But you know what I mean? Like it's these are really, all of this, what's happening there makes me very, like I was saying, concerned about our Arctic, our North. We know we have the resources that the Americans and likely, I would think, Russia would want to. I know Russia's probably pretty resource rich as well, but I'm not sure how they manage their resources and if they've maybe depleted many of them. So like I said, I never used to normally pay such close attention to international affairs. So this is all quite scary. And I think I've even said before in your live, and many other lives that I've been in, is like, it's so reminiscent of what happened to the ancestors of my people, my indigenous ancestors. And, same thing, different process. Like we're going down that same path. And this time you're all coming with us. And, I also feel like, how do we start motivating the indigenous people as well to understand these, which is why, we do this. But yeah, I wish I had more to add to the conversation other than there's a lot of complexities and a lot of things to think about. And it's quite concerning.
And for just on a personal note, what I do for a living, I'm fairly involved in the indigenous community here and close to where I live. And for us, when we were talking about Beaver politics, Miss Radical and I, one of the things we wanted to reach out to all communities to make sure that all communities. So anytime that here on Beaver Politics that we can hear from the indigenous communities here, I'm all for it, and I personally am pleased as punch to have you here and honor us with your viewpoint and your history that more of us can find out, more of us can learn. So thanks very much, Treaty.
Yes, no, thank you. I always enjoy our conversations. Hi, hi.
Sparkle and Shine, what do you have to say?
Sorry, just couldn't get myself off mute. Um, I like what she was saying about, you know, almost sounding crazy when nobody else is seeing what, is laid out like right in front of us and stuff like that. And you talk to some people and they just like, I don't know, not really that political. How can you not be? Like it affects so much of our daily lives and the ins and outs and goings and comings and things like that. And you're like, here, put on the night vision goggles, and they're like, no, I'd rather wander around in the dark. You can only help so much and stuff, but you look at the world and what's going on, and yeah, you have to have some opinion of things so you can counter it in some way. So I'm just saying that, yeah, I appreciate her input.
Well, one of the biggest lies that us as a general population have been kind of told, and I heard it even within my own family, that your votes don't matter. It doesn't matter who you put in there. Um, and I always hearken it back to that saying, and I hate to bring his name up right now, but I think Gretzky said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And I think that applies so much in this case. And I find it funny because I always said that it would take, what would it take as a bit of a historian, a bit of a backyard back nook historian. I always wondered, what would it take in our modern day and age? What kind of personality would it take to do what Mustache Man did in the 1930s? And I always thought, it would take a man of incredible presence, a man of incredible intelligence, a man of incredible charisma, someone who's connected to everybody and has the financial backing and all of this stuff. And all it really took to degrade America in less than 8 years was a fat arsed, low IQ, sociopathic, narcissistic dementia patient. And it's hard to believe that we're at this point, but that's exactly where we are. And for a lot of us, I think we're trying to escape the reality of exactly where we are. And that is what often tips the balances is, if you watch the movie The Mist, it gave you a really good outline of the types of people that you're going to see in a crisis situation. And you're always going to have your people that simply will not come to grips with the reality of the situation. And those are the people that are often influenced the hardest and the easiest. Kingston, what do you have to say?
Well, I have been number one concerned about Ukraine, and I'm very worried about it. I don't have any idea because this man is I'm talking about Trump is evil. If anything would prove it, would be that. I also wrote 3 essays about Canada and Alberta on Reboot Alberta. If any of you is on Facebook, please look for Reboot Alberta. And I wrote 3 essays that they put online. Please read them. And one is actually about Alberta, and actually two of them. So I've been busy trying to fight fascism, I guess, online, but I I am just right now listening. So I'm just my concern is just Ukraine right now more than anything else.
And I really mirror that sentiment because, like I said, to me, Ukraine becomes the linchpin. If Russia takes Ukraine, they are not going to stop there. They will set back for a little while, they will reboot, and they will continue on. And to me, the Ukraine is the linchpin right now. What happens in Ukraine is going to signal basically which way I think this all ends up. Smarshy?
What are we talking about? Just give me a synopsis of what we're talking about so I can.
Well, we're talking basically about what's. I'm basically saying that the Ukraine affair right now is essentially the linchpin to the next 3 years. If Ukraine falls, the next 3 years could be really, really ugly. If the EU backs Ukraine and keeps Russia out of there, there might be some hope.
Yeah, I. What's going on in the Ukraine is absolutely disgusting. We all know that. Um, I I can't believe the the petulant child in the White House is doing what he's doing to them. And Pete Hegseth made a comment about, oh, how the Ukraine is not going to be ever part of the NATO and no one's going to stop Russia from doing what they're doing. I think it's absolutely disgusting that they think that's okay. Like they want to take what they want to take and they're just going to take. I don't think anyone should have the right to do that. And when Crimea was attacked, I think it was Crimea first, right? If
Yep.
I'm not mistaken. When Crimea was hit, that's when I was like, the fuck? I thought the like Budapest made it so that they couldn't attack Ukraine. And that's like that was disheartening to me. And people in the person in the comments that talks about white fragility being a racist term, it is so rampant that that whitey people are so fragile that they can't understand, you know, the fact that their own privilege and their own fragility is their own responsibility when talking about certain things because it is exactly, you know, it's exactly that, and it's so. Oh my God, like I just can't with people lately because they're just so hyper focused on taking over Canada or taking over this country or taking over minerals. Why are we not standing together and stopping this shit? Why are we still playing like we all have a hand in the cookie? We don't all have a hand in the cookie jar. Because I guarantee you, we all do. The left and the right, the governments of every country have their hands in the cookie jar one way or the other. And that's what needs to stop. Get your hand out of the cookie jar, leave well enough alone, let people build their own country back up. And again, we're not blaming just one side, we're blaming every side. Because that's what needs to be done. If we're going to make it better, we need to make it better. That is what we're saying. And I can't. I'm so frustrated with this whole, oh, we're going to take whatever we want attitude by cis-het white men. I can't do it. I can't.
Yep.
Because it's been centuries that they've been doing this. And for
Yep.
what? To hurt people? Hurt people, hurt people. All I gotta say.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, all of this has been in long-term planning, and I think a lot of us, like I said, don't want to come to grips with that realization. And I've said often before, one of the attributes that Russia always had is because they often couldn't compete financially, they often couldn't compete militarily. They explored every single avenue of exploitation and coercion. And Trump was simply part of this entire plan. And I'm pretty sure that if he had won his second term instead of
Yeah.
Biden, the reality would be is that Russia never would have invaded Ukraine. What he would have waited is another couple of years until Trump had fully pulled out of NATO, left NATO isolated, and then he would have moved in. And odds are at that
Hmm.
point, his plan probably would have worked. Because at that point, the Ukrainians would have been completely and utterly isolated other than the EU. We already know that
Right.
Trump tried to blackmail Zelensky already once over his obligations, and according to the Budapest agreement,
Yeah.
Ukraine gives up their nukes. America backs them up because they're giving up their nukes. Russia's happy
Exactly.
because Ukraine is no longer a nuclear power. But
Right.
like I said, over the long term, unfortunately, this plays right into Putler's hands
Yeah.
because he's now going to achieve economically and governmentally what his military couldn't do.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Like, yes, the
Anthony,
Budapest. Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to go on, Smarshy. Anthony, what do you have to say about this?
I got too much to say about it, so I'm going to try to focus on one thing. My God.
Yeah,
Okay, well, first of all, I don't trust Putin at all when he's like, oh, negotiate, because in 1994 there was a negotiated agreement for the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear weapons. They did
yep.
so because the United States, Great Britain, and France said they would back them if they were ever invaded. So, a deal's a deal. And if Russia broke it, how can you ever trust that a deal with Trump isn't just a reason for the Ukrainians to drop their troops, go back home, and then a precise strike on the individuals they need to take out happens, and they take Ukraine when the guard's down? You can't trust these people at all. There's no deal. There can be no deal. There could be no deal with Hitler. There can be no deal with Putin.
And I just did a TikTok just the about a week or two ago because I'd gotten this pushback from a lot of people on the right going, well, we just don't want to come to the table. And I had to make the point, you cannot bargain with a sociopath. You can't. It's simply not in their dynamics to be honorable. It is not in their dynamics to be truthful. It is in their dynamics to take what they want and to use any method to achieve that. Uh,
Yes, and
Black McD there. Can we go on to actually Anthony? I didn't give it. Go on, Anthony, and then Black McD will go to you.
thank you. What I think we can all do right now, because over the years, this is why I believe Trump got such a big army, is because he doesn't get challenged on social media. People aren't on there challenging and posting and saying, no, you people, listen, what he's posting right here, this is wrong and this is why. on the pages that they are on, if we all went in mass, I'm talking people around the world, like you remember that thing that used to happen many years ago where the world all joined hands around the
Yep.
world, and then
Hands
we
around
also
the
had
world.
We
Yep.
Are the World and all these different things. Right now, we all need to be keyboard warriors around the world, and we need to flood their pages so much with so much content standing up against them, they won't even be able to read the posts. They won't even
Yep.
have the time to keep going decline, 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 decline. That'll waste their time. We need to shut them up and push them back into the shadows. And the only way we can do this is what I'm saying. Canadian Keyboard Warriors, I want to get it started on, I'm going to change the name of this page. And I truly believe if we go to their pages and put down how much, because Germany never spoke up at that time when they really needed to. Here we are at that precipice. We really need to speak up now. We really need to be warriors on the keyboards to dispel them and to even stop them from recruiting more people with their crap online. They're creating a page after page on Facebook of anti this and anti that, and it's getting really bad. And they're just going to breed more sycophancy if we don't get on there and show our strength. I land my plane.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And one of the things that I'm trying to promote is even though Beaver politics is focused on predominantly Canada and North America, I also want Beaver Politics to be an outlet and an information channel to other people around the world so they know what is going on here in Canada, here in North America. So those avenues don't get muddied. So people like you and I, the average person, can get somewhat or absolutely reliable information from the moment when it's happening from the people on the ground. And I am a firm believer that if you want to find out what's going on, you talk to the people on the ground. Black McD, we'll have you chime in. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Uh, I've been listening, and as you said earlier about negotiating with a psychopath, this is, I would say, 3 years that Zelensky had to negotiate, did not engage. His country is about to be overrun. So, what choice does he really have at this point? I think you can really blame is the Western liberals for convincing the Ukrainians to go on the suicide mission against Russia.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question here. Uh, I'm going to ask you a straight out question. Where are you? What country are you from?
Why is it relevant?
It's relevant to the question I'm going to ask you. Actually, it doesn't even matter. Whatever country you're from, if you are invaded, do you need another country to tell you to stand up for your own country?
Yes, if you are a third world nation, yes.
Are you telling me that even though you are a third world nation, if somebody comes knocking on the door to take your stuff, that you are not going to resist? You absolutely you're going to resist. And the fact that you think that you can come out here and say that a country's people are not going to push back when they are invaded, when history tells us that that is always the case, even if the war started out in the wrong vein. Once they're invading your land, you're going to stand up for yourself, whether a third country allows you or tells you or not. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. No one is saying that the Ukrainians have no reason to fight, but you have to be able to negotiate because if you don't, let's ignore negotiations. Let this stalemate continue. And then eventually the Russians will push into Kiev. So now, if you have no negotiations, now the Russians get everything truly.
Okay, so here's the thing, though. The Russian military is putting T-55s out on the battlefield. Do you know what a T-55 is? This is a just after World War II piece of hardware. It is completely outmoded and outdated by modern standards. And these are the types of pieces of equipment that Russia is now putting out there at 3 years of war. But you're telling me that even though the West has essentially been trickling arms and equipment, and I mean trickling arms and equipment. We have reduced Russia to the point of pulling out. Like I'm waiting for them to pull out T-34s. In all honesty,
Russians have stopped using tanks since 2022. Tanks are not in combat.
yeah, but you're missing my point, my friend. Is that they are leaving tens of thousands of shattered pieces of equipment in Ukraine. And right now, the fact that Trump is bartering on behalf of Russia is basically telling me that Russia has reached its limit in this war functionally. Because, like I said, they are pulling T-55s out of the woodwork trying to maintain these fronts. Meanwhile, they're scraping men and material from pretty much anywhere that they can. But thanks for chiming in. Frontline, I'm going to bring in. Hey, girl, welcome to the show.
Hi. So, hold on. Just another quick couple of questions for Black MCW or whatever. Do you believe that Russia invaded Ukraine, or do you think that Ukraine started the war?
Russia did invade Ukraine, yes.
Okay, unfairly?
Did Russia have justification? Well, the real reason I cannot say on TikTok.
Why not?
It is against TikTok terms of service.
Can you figure out some code words? The rest of us usually use all kinds of code words.
No, because it's going to be baiting to get banned.
Okay.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
I just think if you honestly believe that these negotiations, if we don't have them, what is the end result?
But what? And I'm going to ask you again. Somebody invades your land. You hold them for 3 years at a standstill. The guy who has been helping you out turns his back on you and basically puts you in a no-win situation where you now have to not only give up the land that you've lost, that Putler's crappy military couldn't win him. He's now going to get that economically and politically. Now what's left of Ukraine is going to go to the Americans because the Americans are now blackmailing that country. Where do you see anywhere in that point where Ukraine gets to stay as Ukraine?
So I don't even know what's the point of the debate at that point, because you're saying that the Americans would take Ukraine. So
They're
wouldn't that
asking for
guarantee wouldn't
they're
that
asking
guarantee Ukrainian protection?
But they were according to the Budapest Agreement. If Ukraine gave up its nukes, which they did, that the Americans and NATO were going to back them up against an invasion,
Okay, we're
which
we're
they
jumping
have.
topics. You said the United States would take the Ukrainian resources, correct?
Yep,
So
because
wouldn't that
now,
ensure U.S. protection? Because now the U.S. has an economic interest in Ukraine.
okay, but like I mentioned, according to the peace treaty, Russia keeps what it already has and more. And America now gets 50% of Ukraine's minerals. Whereas if you were a Ukrainian looking at this deal, where do you look at this deal and go, yeah, that's a good deal for us? We not only lose a pile of territory, but what wealth we have is now going to get funneled into America. So, like I said, where do you see as a Ukrainian, if you were a Ukrainian looking at this deal, going, yeah, this is good for us?
As opposed to grinding down your manpower and then having a complete Russian takeover of Kyiv?
Would you rather be, this goes back to that old saying of, I would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. And that is the choice that the Ukrainians are making. They would rather die than let the Russians do what they are doing. And I'm a little surprised that I would have to debate that with anybody.
Okay, well,
What's
people love
also
life.
what's to stop Russia from going further? If they get Ukraine, what's to stop them from going further?
Article 5 of NATO.
Okay.
That's okay. They can take Moldova, for example. Moldova's not part of NATO. What's to stop them from doing that?
If the Russians take Moldova, I mean, to be honest, I'm not willing to risk blowing up the world for Moldova. So if they want to take it,
How does blowing
it's
up the world have
fine.
anything to do with that?
Because I just answered the question of what would stop them from moving into Poland.
Yeah, I didn't
So
ask you that. I asked you about Moldova. What would stop them
No, you
from
asked me
getting
about
Moldova?
what would stop
I
Russia
never
from
said
moving
Poland. I
westward,
said what would stop them from
and
going
I answered
further.
Article 5, and then you said
Moldova
Moldova,
is not part of
which
NATO.
actually pull up the size of Moldova. Let me
It's a
show
tiny
you what
little
the
strip.
liberals are willing to blow up
I'm
the
actually
rest of the
from that
world
part of the
for.
world. I
Bring
don't
up the
need you to
size of
educate
Moldova.
me on what Europe looks like. I know how small it is. I'm just asking you,
Okay,
what
so
is going to
you really
stop
you see
them
your
from going into
families.
Moldova?
I'm gonna mute you. I'm gonna mute you,
Where are you
and we're
from?
gonna come
Toronto?
back to you here. Hang on. No, I'm gonna mute you here. I'm gonna ask you to sit back for a minute, or I'm gonna ask you to leave.
I want to have a
Here's
conversation with
Oh,
him.
tough questions, and
okay.
I have to leave because I'm asking the tough questions.
No.
No, we're
I'm
shouting
happy to
over
have a
These
each other.
questions
conversation
should have
with
been
him.
asked 3 years ago.
Where do you get your information? Where do you consume your information?
Certainly not from state TV.
Where do you consume your information? What is your
You consume
expertise?
your
What is
information
your
from Canadian state
expertise
TV.
in Eastern European history, Eastern European politics? What's your expertise?
Definitely not Canadian state TV.
Okay, so like what? YouTube? Where do you get your info?
It's a solid question. Why won't you answer it?
It's one of my favorite questions, to be honest.
I just want to understand where your information comes from. That's all.
The same place that told us vaccines are safe and effective and have no side effects.
You're
Okay,
sidestepping.
so
The
the deep
question is
dark
very
web
direct.
and Elon Musk's X and YouTube. Got it.
Remember,
Got it.
safe and
Super
effective and
credible. That's
no
all I
side
needed to know.
effects.
Thank you.
Remember.
Okay, Mickey, I'm gonna ask you to stay silent here for a little bit. Again, we want to. Oh my God, do we really have to go over the vax thing again? I mean, is that really? No, we're not going to go back over the vax thing again. Uh, we're going to continue on down the path here. Auntie B, you haven't had a chance to have a say here. And I'd like to bring some of this back to what the original topic of the conversation was, is the influence of Trump in his position of power, along with Elon and with Putler, and obviously Ukraine is a huge portion and part and parcel of that. So, Auntie, what do you have to say?
Firstly, can I just say good evening and good morning to those of us who are in Europe. Um, well, yeah, what I'd like to say is that firstly you need to remember the history here. Donald Trump first entered what was then the United Soviet Socialist Republic in 1977, and he visited that place several times until its collapse, and that was obviously 91, but the last time he visited was in 1988. Um, this was a time where where basically he himself had exhausted most of his business empire in the United States. Strange how he managed to come back with lots and lots of money from those numerous trips, hey? So
Yep,
you've got Vladimir Putin, you've got obviously Donald J. Trump, you've got Lukashenko, Viktor Orban, and you've got other actors in other countries like Marie Le Pen in France. You've got obviously, Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson here in the UK, and of course you've got the
yep,
AFD in Germany. So one of the things is that there is a now there is a global cabal of extremely wealthy business people and these right-wing actors who basically wants to undermine our democratic way of life. They are using Ukraine as a linchpin for that operation. Hungary has already practically fallen under their version of Project 2025 and is likely to be expelled from Hungary and also NATO at some point. Um,
Yep.
but when it comes to Ukraine, I'm just gonna just put some figures out there for you, right? Um, if that's okay.
You
Um,
betcha. Let's hear it.
okay, thank you, appreciate that. So right now, Ukraine currently has a roughly around 550,000 metric tons of lithium ore. That lithium ore is on the open market per metric ton is roughly $10,400. That equates to anywhere between 5.3 and 5.5 trillion dollars total value to the Ukrainian ore. Now here's the thing, that's a lot, but it gets more because the best way of dealing with ore, especially in a landlocked or a partially landlocked situation where they might have to pay tariffs to go through the straits by Turkey for such operations. The best thing to do is process it close to the site of operation. Now, suddenly you've got to times that 5.3 to 5.5 trillion by 10 because the substrates, the usable stuff, will be worth about $55 trillion. There is also approximately 32 to $35 trillion worth of cobalt inside Ukraine. Ukraine itself, with all of its mineral wealth, the oil, the gas, the potash, etc., it's not to mention uranium as well. It's worth over $230 trillion. Current global deficit is about $480 trillion. So Ukraine alone, with its mineral wealth, could literally pay off nearly half the global deficit. This is about a carving up operation because Russia does
Yep.
have a lot of its own mineral wealth,
Yep.
but it's really hard to access, and this is because it's under half a mile plus of permafrost. Now, anybody has ever dug a bit of frozen garden up or a bit of frozen ground knows how difficult that is. We're talking rock. We're not talking bit of frozen soil. And even with modern
Yep.
machinery, the temperatures in places like Yakut, it on average reaches down to like minus 68, which is quick Fahrenheit. I believe that's like minus 96 Fahrenheit. Um, and that's for most of the year round. So all of the lies, all of the manipulations is now got to the point where we are being pushed to a full scale world war. Uh, the
Yep.
UK has already started painting some of our regional civilian airport runways with military markings for just in case. We have got Germany, it's ready to kick the United States out of its territory, and several European countries are likely to follow suit as far as
German
military
elections tomorrow.
bases. I'm well aware of the German elections, and what Putin has done and what Trump has done in the past 2 weeks has been the biggest gift to the center and the center left. Um, believe you me, Germany is very angry right now because they were the bad guys 80 plus years ago. They've been through this radio and now they're seeing the very people that
Yep.
helped fight
Yep.
against this fascism turn into fascists. They're not going to tolerate that. Germany's smart. They're smarter than people like yourself, with all due respect, because you're getting your information from
We'll
the
see after tomorrow.
Russian Telegraph channel. I've been just watching from the
Sorry, this
outside.
this guy on the bottom is an AFD supporter. His thing says I stand with Russia, and in his profile he has hashtag protect racism.
I thought the
Okay.
AFD is going to lose.
It doesn't matter. The
Okay.
fact is they're a fascist right
It
wing
doesn't
party.
matter. Thank you.
Okay. We're gonna take him off. Thanks for looking into that front line. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So yeah. So my position is, Europe is gearing up for a massive war. The United States is going to be relegated to a regional power because the only reason the US is strong is because of its logistics. It'll also be cut out of massive amounts of information streams. And what's happening with you guys in Canada? You're a Commonwealth nation. You're our friends, and there's 2.7 billion Commonwealth citizens ready to back you. So we've got your back, Canada.
Auntie, can I you don't have to answer if you don't. Can you tell me roughly where you're at?
Yeah, I'm in Wales, the United Kingdom.
Right on.
I am 235 seconds from launch to destination of Sarmat 2 and Sarmat 3 missiles.
Oh, I gotcha. Alrighty. Well, you know what? I super appreciate you coming up here because I wanted to get a perspective from different parts of the world. So thank you so much for coming up here. We're going to get back to you here in a couple of minutes. Joe, we'll have you on next here, and then Paulie, we'll hear from you. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Kind of came in the middle of the whole thing. I was trying to remember. You were trying to, I think, to direct back to the original topic, which was, if you can repeat.
Uh,
Um,
well, we're
mhm.
talking about Trump, we're talking about Elon, we're talking about
Yeah.
Putler, and we're talking about Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, Ukraine have always had the same position as I do with Palestine. Both of them should be free. So there's been a question for that. Yeah. I can't disagree with anything Auntie just said there, especially in regards to, I mean, if what you were saying was true there, radical in regards to them pulling out T-55s, my first question is, what museum did they pull them damn things out of? Because holy crap, they're old
Oh yeah,
and desperate,
but that
obviously.
but it really tells you about like I said, I believe they're at a
Hmm.
desperation point, and that's why he's so desperate to get these peace talks going, because uh, if NATO pulls out and the backing pulls out, then whatever he's got left is probably enough to take care of Ukraine, especially if Elon cuts out the internet. That'll be absolutely a death blow to Ukraine, and I think that's what the intention actually is at this point. But we basically have Trump and Elon blackmailing Zelensky for what's left after Russia. They hand what's part of Ukraine to Russia. To me, that's the part that seems to be skipping everybody. Is we're just divvying up Russia like we did everything else after the Second World War.
Divvying up
Divvying up
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Yeah, and it's. I mean, yeah, it's absolutely right in regards to this is a slap in the face as Zelensky, where the promise was made for the U.S. to back Ukraine with the agreement that they made. No nukes, you get protection. Done.
Yep.
Where's your promise? And obviously, Trump has just doesn't care about anything that has any historical or just promises made. He's terrible at his own promises, let alone other people's promises he's supposed to keep. Um,
May I add to something? Is that
sure.
okay?
Yeah, please do.
Um, Thank
Mhm.
you. So it's more fun. There's a lot more fundamental about that, and as well, because it's not just about the Budapest Memorandum. There's been a lot of communication with the expansion of NATO eastward as well, and a lot of people have been coming up with that line. Now, I'm working a lot with soldiers at the front that are currently in Ukraine, including the 501st, the 118th, the 101st, and the Foreign Legion, the International Legion, and so on and so forth. And part of the misinformation campaign has been, oh well, we promised not to go further. That's factually incorrect. That was to do with the Red Army retreat from East Germany during the initial stages of the USSR collapse. And in fact, if you read Mikhail Gorbachev's memoirs, they're actually in that information is there. It was written by the ex-president of the Soviet Union.
Yep.
Um, and people keep on arguing that. Plus, also, if you're an American and you're listening into this live by Beaver Politics right now, 8,000 Ukrainian troops came to America's aid in Iraq, and they weren't even part of NATO. They came and they fought, they bled and alive because do you know what? The Ukrainians looked at the Budapest Memorandum and went, they've promised to come and help us, and because they've made this promise and now America's been attacked and they've called for help, we're going to go and help. And just like the UK came and helped, I'm not going to say that, and I have questions over the Iraq War, but we're not talking about that. We collectively, we owe our honor and our word, not just to the Budapest Memorandum, but to the fact that Ukrainians were willing to do what it takes. In fact, in the California wildfires recently, Zelensky said, "Can I send you some firefighters?"
Yep.
I
Says a
apologize if
lot.
I monologue. I've got a lot of knowledge on this subject.
No,
No,
it's quite
and
good.
appreciate you jumping in there, Auntie, and we'll get back to you. So, Polly, we'll get to you, and welcome to the show, and then Frontline, we'll get back up to you and come back down the row here.
Well, we can keep going with the rest, but yeah, I mean, the only concern I have right now is very much, as we're discussing it, the divvying of just the divvying in power, where it is going to be the states really focused on Canada. And again, he keeps talking about us as a 51st state, and he's not stopping. That's my constant concern right now.
Yep. Okay, Polly, we'll get you on there, girl.
I think that we should block and ban Elon Musk from having Starlink in any country, since he's using it now as sort of a political weapon against Ukraine, against any country. Like if they're gonna use it that way, we should not have it. We should ban it from every country. Right?
How long before one of the EU countries or the UK put out an arrest warrant for him? Polly?
I don't know. I hope soon. Like I hope he is going to become a war criminal because he's interfering.
He's given Russia Starlink and they have installed it on their Shahed drones and several other platforms to subvert counter-electronic warfare systems that Ukraine have designed and are using to stop drones hitting their towns and cities and their soldiers. Elon has provided them that capacity. He has Ukrainian blood on his hands.
Yep. Yeah, I believed it for a while. So, Frontline, what do you have to say?
Oh, there's so much that I can say, obviously. I don't even know which direction I want to take this in because Auntie here reminded me that there's actually so many rumors and so much propaganda that's going on about, how this invasion started, what it's all about. I actually wanted to say the same thing as well, is that all these people keep parroting this, like, oh, NATO never promised to go out east, which is absolute BS. And it has to do exactly with what Auntie said, that it was never about expanding into Eastern Europe. It was just about the Red Army not going into Eastern Germany. And it was a long time ago. Nothing was written in stone. There was no formal agreement. But there's so many propaganda videos online, and these people just eat them up. Like it's quite insane, right? And there's also this other rumor that talks about the fact that the Russians went into Ukraine to de-Yatsify it, and that Ukraine is a Yahtzee state, which is BS. But this is how these propaganda pieces start. They take one tiny little pebble of truth, and then they wrap it up in a ton of lies. So that when people go search for a tiny little pebble of truth, sometimes they find it and they go, oh, everything else must be true as well. This is how propaganda gets spread. That's why it's so incredibly dangerous. And that's why people really need to understand context, nuance. They need to understand history. And we're having these massive issues because people just don't know. They have no expertise in these areas. What I wanted to bring up to you guys, though, because actually Intergalactic Ferg brought it up to me earlier, so I went and started digging into it. But did you guys know that Trump and Elon are about to go audit the gold storage that remains in Fort Knox?
Yep.
And do you know do you guys understand the implications of that?
Yeah, unfortunately,
Bitcoin.
yeah.
because it sounds like, I mean, they're going off the fact that there's a rumor going around, a rumor that was started by Alex Jones, to be exact, that gold is missing, right? So they need to go now audit it. Well, what's going to happen if they go audit it and then they can create whatever narrative they want? They can say, oh, gold is missing or it's gone or whatever. And now we have to, because this is a financial crisis, now we have to move to cryptocurrency. And this
Yep.
is part of their Project 2025 was to move them over to crypto. And now with Elon having all of their social security data, it's just so dystopian that I can't even put it into words right now without feeling like I'm going to have a full-blown anxiety attack. But it's scaring the absolute crap out of me if they're going to do this. And also with them now saying that they're going to release the Epstein files. Again, how do we know that anything is going to be true? It's just another way that they're going to create a narrative and they're going to say that, oh, it's the Democrats that are corrupt. And they're going to try to even leak it to connect liberals in Canada because they're going to try to rally up
Yep.
their base.
Yep.
Like this is it's just getting worse and worse and worse every single day. And the only glimmer of hope I have is that Europe gets its shit together and they work with each other. But
We're
I'm
doing
scared of that too.
Well, we're doing that. We're doing that because ultimately, what people have got to realize, and I know I might create some waves with some folks, but the whole loving embrace of the U.S. military has been tantamount to a protection racket for decades now. What we've got to remember here, people, is that up until around 1974, the West was losing the Cold War economically. It was only because of the offer made to the Arab nations at the time to create the petrodollar exchange system that the West refinanced. And when I say the West, I'm on about the United States because between World War I, World War II, the Korean War, then the Vietnam War, the space race, nuclear bombs, and so on and so forth, the United States was running out of money. In fact, Western Europe was propping up NATO at that point. And then of course the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan in the hope to conquer that country and then to be able to literally put its military on the doorstep of the Middle East as a mechanism for the USSR to force the petrodollar coming to an end in a way of trying to save itself.
Yep.
And the reality is that petrodollar exchange system should have ended in the early 90s. It didn't. The Americans have become a dangerous proposition for us all. And when I say it's not, and when I say the Americans, I'm referring to um, at the moment Donald Trump and his MAGA, but the Americans, both Democrats and indeed the Republicans, over the past 30 years, they have done nothing to deal with their deficit. And now right now, America's GDP cannot cash its own checks because the deficit keeps on increasing. This is about as much about trying to save Russia for Trump and also save America, and the rest of us are going to be casualties in that. And this is what Europe has now woken up to, and we are getting our shit together. And that also means that we need global partners, and it's got to the stage now already this quickly where China has rolled out the red carpet to Europe to say, look, we may have had some disagreements, but clearly you can see that the people who thought were your friends will stab you in the back, effectively. Apologies, host, for using that terminology. Do you want to now be better friends?
Yep.
What about so what's your take on all of these, far right parties though in Europe that are coming to power? Like for example, what's going on in Romania right now? If Catalin is able to get back into the election after the election was canceled due to the fact that they caught on to Russia dumping money into his advertising campaign that wants to basically pull Romania out of NATO, what's going to happen, right? I mean, there's all of these powers that are rising. There's so much division because the megas now are not just in the United States. They're in Canada, they're in Europe, they're
I
everywhere.
know.
How
I
do we
know.
deal with that? How do we deal with that?
Well, you're not going to like the answer. But
Right.
the only way that I can see us dealing with that, and we need people on the center and the left. People need to get their hands dirty. There needs to be a reckoning. Whilst those parties in the other parts of the world are still in significant minority status, we effectively what I'm saying, we need a war. That's the only way that we're going to flush these people out, because ultimately war will come to us, and we will not have the numbers that we have now if we try and kick that can down the road. We have got enough numbers, liberally thinking, free thinking, educated people right now who are capable of leading the charge against these people. But those people, they are thugs, and unfortunately, we have to take physical action to shut these people down, which means X needs to be physically shut down. Newspapers such as the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph in the UK need to be physically shut down. There needs to be criminal prosecutions. There needs to be mass arrests, and
Yep.
that we need to shut these down. And if we need to go to war to do it, we need to go to war. We did it 80 odd years ago to shut down fascism. We can do it again, but this time we do not allow any part of it to survive. We crush it under heel forevermore, and we make sure that we have some form of agreed anti fascism education moving forward in every country around the world that is uniform and expected to be taught to prevent this problem from rearing its ugly head again.
Yep. Auntie,
I'm just
that
wondering.
brilliantly said. Brilliantly said.
I'm on board with that 110%. That's what I've been saying too. But what I'm wondering is, how do we practically do that, right? There are so many people that are still completely oblivious to what's happening. There's so many people that are asleep. There's so many people that don't want to engage, that don't want to do anything. And it seems like a lot of this has to do still though with government, right? Like, who's going to go shut these down? It won't be the citizens. It has to be the government. The citizens can't make an arrest. So
Ah,
how do we put that into practical, how do we practically apply these ideas when we have, I mean, I'm talking for myself in Canada, but I feel like 50 to 60% of Canada is completely asleep. Like, some of them might vote the right way, but a lot of them are not willing to get their hands dirty. A lot of them aren't even willing to turn on the news.
okay, so one of the things I would say, and to that, is that the media is part of the problem. So most people, when we go and protest, we go to our parliaments or our assemblies, and we go and protest outside those places. We're like, politicians, you must listen to us, you must do something. The trouble is when you have a certain number of those politicians in the pockets of the mass media already, it is the mass media that needs, and that includes internet giants. So we need to start protesting outside the offices of our newspapers. We need to start protesting outside the offices of our radio stations. But more and more increasingly important, we need to start protesting outside of our Google offices, of our Facebook offices, of our X offices, and we need to send them a warning that we've had enough, and you will stop telling the truth, or we will literally shut your offices down. And if the offices aren't there, it's going to be a lot harder for them to maintain operations. And if the police get involved, more better, because that way the politicians are going to be forced to listen to the people, because we are literally taking the source of their power away from them.
Auntie is again nicely said. I'm what I want to throw in at this point here is I've said often enough that part of the reason that they are attacking the government so forcefully is the fact that the government is the only thing that can step in and change the social media landscape. And let's not kid ourselves that the owners of TikTok, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk are well aware of that fact. And I've said all along that one of the main reasons that they're trying to bring down the government is so these social media companies can essentially take over government operations worldwide and globalize themselves as the power structure on planet Earth. And, when we look at different outcomes for the future, I'm hoping for a Star Trek kind of a future. What we are heading toward is far more. I know a lot of people are calling it's heading toward the Hunger Games. Now, Handmaiden's Tale is simply the path that we are heading toward in achieving a Hunger Games type of a society. That's where they want us. They want an utter elite, and then everything else is resource based, and the peasants are there to extract those resources. So, Sparkle and Shine, I'm going to go to you, and then Kingston, we'll get to you next.
Okay, I got a couple things that I kind of wanted to touch on. So much going on. I love this show. Um, the whole thing with how did Trump was declared president in like the first night. So like how far does the Russian corruption go? I mean, there was reports of ballot boxes that were on fire. Didn't seem to matter. Pay no mind to that. He's still the president. Um, People being completely asleep and in the dark. I'm in Alberta. I grew up always told, it doesn't matter how you vote, the votes are decided in the East. So,
Yep.
this whole proactive thing is completely new to me and I'm loving it. Um, yeah, the whole thing about Trump never paying people was like, how is this guy supposed to be held accountable for all of his promises and on all of his promises when he couldn't even pay his own people who were building casinos and hotels and everything for him? And how were people just so completely ignorant? Or is the term brainwashed? Is the term gaslit? Like, what was going on with these people to say, yeah, no, the facts don't matter. Let's just, go with what the words that are coming out of his mouth, even though he's a known liar. Like, the disconnect is mind-boggling.
It is and it isn't. I'll just chime in quickly here, and then Kingston, I want to hear from you. I got to do a quick plug here, though. Everybody that's watching the show, thanks for coming in. I am Mr. Radical. The show is Radicalized here at 6 o'clock Mountain, 8 o'clock Eastern every Saturday. I am part of the Beaver Politics team. Beaver Politics' show is going now 7 days a week. I am part of that retinue. Thanks for stopping in. The show is all about knowledge through discourse. We want to talk to everybody. We want to have different opinions. We want to have everybody have their voice. I want to thank everybody that's in the box today and everybody that's stopping for the live today. Tapping is clapping, sharing is caring. But Kingston, what do you have to say about all of this?
Briefly, three things. One is that the conflict with Russia and Ukraine will not be solved through negotiation. It needs Europe to send troops or show Russia that we mean it. And then Russia realizes that he's not going to win and has to find a way to back off. And the second thing I wanted to mention is that Donald Trump's evil regime is going to crack down further more. It's going to go further to the right because he only has the judicial branch of government against him, not against, but independent of him and in his way. It is a matter of time before he has to either suspend the Constitution or go around it. And by the way, Elon Musk's bodyguards have been deputized by U.S. Marshal. That's like, you can imagine, that's
Oh,
another step of
shit.
fascism. That's another step of fascism, which means they are a group of, in a sense, law enforcement authority, but directly report only and only to Elon Musk, and they don't even report to courts. They don't care about courts. They're not government law enforcement. their Elon Musk private army. So I think we are headed for worse before we get any better. So I am expecting more fascism and more fascism in US. So be prepared that he's going to start arresting people, locking them up, shutting them down. Third thing I want to say, and I apologize, I'm fast. I just don't want to take too much of everybody's time. I've been watching and I've been writing. We have received unbelievable amount of support from citizens around the world. Canada, I'm talking about, and Canadian resistance to Donald Trump. People from Germany, Britain, and even what is it? Poland are sending their love and support for us. We are not alone. I am more optimistic, but unfortunately, just like it was said, there will be a war. Unfortunately, I don't know what. I don't know whether it will be an American Civil War, whether it will be World War III, but this conflict will eventually come to a head. And part of it will be role of Russia and what they're gonna do. And I want to thank Antti in Great Britain for the education he gave us, and I'm very pleased. Thank you very much. So briefly, those three topics. As I said, be prepared that fascism going to continue in U.S. And I don't know what's going to do with judicials, but I think eventually he's going to somehow suspend judicials or suspend the constitution. He will have no other choice.
Yeah, and if I can just say Slava Ukraine.
Slava.
Slava
Joe,
Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
Joe, what do you have to say?
It's that just so as I was listening to Kingston and to the other points, one of the bigger things is as we're everybody's talking about, there's going to be an escalation of movements in regards to we're seeing the private guards, the private bodyguards becoming deputized and everything else. One of the key things we need to keep an eye on, because this is one of of the many weird failings of Trump. One of the key things he is good at is riling up his base, riling up the people, and narrating stories that a large chunk of these people will follow. And he is going to, and I'm convinced we've already seen him start to do that. I'm convinced he's going to be starting to do a lot more um, stories in regards to the large crisis, the enemy, the problems that we need to address, and this is what he's going to be using to start getting himself more powers. How he might be able to override the
Completely
courts.
with
The
him.
courts are corrupt. We need to address the courts. Gets override and by putting in the narrative. Canada is
Yep.
trying to rob us. Keeps doing that, and with enough time, he'll be able to get the power from the Congress to annex. He will keep doing these stories. People will keep believing because they don't check. He's the guy that makes them feel good because he's the one that shows them the problems. He's the one that tells them the solutions. And as long as they're not checking it and they don't look up, they're going to believe everything.
Alrighty, Blade Rogers, welcome to the show. As always, Beaver Politics is about knowledge through discourse, where we keep our uh, operation respectful on all fronts. So let's hear what you have to say today.
Yeah, I just had a question for Auntie there, and was talking about this is going to end up in war, and it's going to take a war. So, just a question, Auntie. I guess you're saying that you're all for military spending and military buildup.
Well, we're at that point now where peace is going to be extremely highly elusive without physical action. If you're talking about military spending, one of the things about the military spending is that it's an investment in ourselves as much as it is in Ukraine. So, for example, when we have a stockpile of weapons, now for numerous reasons they go out of date. The chemicals in the explosives start degrading. The electrolytic capacitors on the PCBs, the actual electrolytic gels in those start degrading. So we've either got to pay to destroy those weapons ourselves, or we can hand them to Ukraine at full market value, which is what we're doing. It's like lend lease.
Yep.
So the military spending argument is always quite a weak one, because we are actually restocking ourselves with our latest and greatest hits whilst getting rid of a whole lot of stockpile at original market value. So, for example, you can buy at government auction in the States a Humvee for like $10,000. That's a demilitarized one. Um, but we might be selling that same Humvee to Ukraine for like 100 grand. So whereas, so does that make sense?
No, no,
Yep.
I do understand that. I mean, of course, there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of waste that goes into that. But I guess my question is, though, as a whole, I don't think that there's any argument here if we are going to pivot from the United States, whether it's us, whether it's Europe, our allies, there is going to have to be an increase in our investment in defense.
Percent, but that's the thing. It's like if we are it's. I would argue that part of this is our fault as a collective, the West, if we exclude the United States in the conversation for the moment,
I agree.
because we have become overly reliant. And in fact, they've made a ton of money over multiple generations of our citizens now because it's automatic. Oh, well, let's go and buy the weapons off them. Like, I know Canada was designing some of the best fighter aircraft in the world, and they've just ended up at the bottom of a lake because no, because Canada's being forced to buy American. European partners have been forced to still beef up our militaries with American equipment, whereas we should be building ourselves. Like purely from a European perspective, we should be building every 20 years one or two fantastic Euro tanks. We should be building every 20 years one or two great fighter aircraft, great bombers, one or two types of aircraft carriers that each and every country will invest in, and we can have, by rights, Europe should have at least the equivalent blue water fleet as the United States, and that includes having SAG groups. But we don't because we're too busy wrapping ourselves in our own little national flags, and then when we need the big stuff, oh, it's okay. America's there. They're like the supermarket for the military tech. That stuff's got to stop.
And you're speaking my language, and I agree there. But you made the comment that that the center and center left have to get it together. But with this buildup come spending. The money has to come from somewhere. And so if you're looking at our politics, center left and onwards, that means that there is going to have to be some sacrifices. And I guess that's a question to the group. Are we willing to do that and do the things that that we need to do? Because in essence, that has been the it's kind of nonsensical in a way, the United States' view on this, because they have been rewarded handsomely by being the protectorate. But obviously they've gotten away from that, and he's gone off in the stratosphere. But I digress. But one of the arguments is, though, we're just not spending enough. We need to be more self-reliant. But with that is going to come some sacrifices. And are we willing? We willing to sacrifice?
Can I say something on that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, why don't we look at the insane amount of money that we spend on corporate bailouts? We dump so much money into corporations. Why are we doing that? We could take that money and spend it on our military instead. It doesn't have to come from us as the people making really big sacrifices in terms of our social programs, if that's where you were going to go with that. We can make the corporations either, we can tax them more, or we can stop handing them out bailouts.
True.
Corporate handouts. That's one of the biggest resources. I mean, that's one of the biggest ways that we waste our money in government is corporate bailouts. It's not social programs.
Oh, I agree. And that has to be on the table, but I don't think that we're aligned.
But that's what the right does. The centrists and the left, I mean, the centrists do it a lot more, but the leftists do it less, and the right does it the most.
Okay, but
The right
I'm
is
gonna.
all about giving tax cuts to the rich and helping them out and continuing to bail them out.
Now,
So
I'm going to jump in
So is
because,
a battery
hang on,
plant
guys.
okay?
Hang on, guys.
Is a,
I want to throw this out there. Not only is it the business community, but as the resident atheist on the panel here, what I want to suggest also is not only is it corporate welfare, it is the amount of taxes that they hide that are legitimately taxable areas. And the other thing is the amount of money that religious organizations pull out of North America on a yearly basis. Now, when I looked into it, the Catholic Church in Canada, now this is just the Catholic Church, and this is based on what little information that we could actually get about the amount of money that the church had coming in. So, on that little bit of information, they could track down $200 million in donations just on the Catholic Church, on top of over $4 billion of taxable land and wealth and everything else as far as hardware on the ground. The amount of dollars that we allow other people to take away is astounding because, like I said, that's $200 million on $4 billion worth of property. That's just the Catholics. So you would have to think that the amount of money that the religion pulled out of just Canada over those years has got to be in the neighborhood of about $2 billion, just the Catholics. So when we are talking about corporations and the subsidies that they get, we cannot forget that the church is absolutely and fundamentally a corporation, no different than Shell, no different than Loblaws.
I would also argue as well, if I may, that you've just got to look at the global financial crisis of 2008. The banks globally were rescued by the governments and the citizenships. They should have been made to continue to pay back money continuously once they had readjusted their balance sheets to the new reality. But we also got to take into consideration the reason for them getting to that stage in the first place was the mass deregulation in the 1980s, the crushing of unions throughout the Western world, and more importantly than that, the notion of trickle down economics, also known as Reaganomics in the United States. That
Yep.
is what has set up our weak economy, where we are continuously, as peoples, having to go to these private corporations which don't pay their fair shares of taxes into our systems, who take the piss, excuse the language, but are basically fucking around with us all the time. And we need to reinstall regulation into our banks. We need to get rid of trickle down economics. They don't get to invest money in art collections and private islands and $350 million super yachts anymore. That money needs to be in our treasuries and in our pocketbooks. So moving forward, we actually have an economy capable of fighting any war, but also fighting for the health and education of our citizens during peacetime.
Absolutely.
I
Paulie,
want
we
to
haven't
ask
heard
him.
from you in a while. Jump in there, please.
If I can
Who?
follow up after Polly, I want to go back to the religion part for a bit.
You
Did you
betcha.
say? Did you say my name?
You
Yes.
betcha, Paulie.
Blade Roger, I'm wondering what you think about, like, you're worried about money going into the military and that people are going to have to sacrifice because of it. And I'm just wondering, what makes you think we don't need a military right now? Like, what would we do without it?
Oh, no, that's quite the opposite. I think that we do need a military, and I think that it was crazy for us to ignore it all these years. And you know, the excuse that I normally get is, well, who wants to hurt poor old Canada? They don't look at the big picture, and I think that right now, I mean, this is a prime example of the spot we can get ourselves in. So no, I've been all for for a buildup of the Canadian military. It's a sovereignty issue, right?
Every government has gutted our military. Every
I agree.
liberals, conservatives, anybody who's been in power has taken away from our military. We've always thought that the Americans are going to be our friends, and look where it's got us now. Hey,
I agree, but to be fair, it's not created equal. So John Chrétien, okay, he was in a little bit different position than what Justin Trudeau was in. The world was was a different place, and I'm not saying that that the Mulroonies and the Chrétiens of the world doesn't bear some of the blame, but at the end of the day, it's a different world, and again, I don't think that somebody is going to go and invade Toronto tomorrow, but it's very realistic that they're going to go and start shaving away at the Arctic, and for example, and I think that's a very, very real possibility, and again, I hear what you guys are all saying in corporate welfare, but I think that where we're at right now is that it's some people don't think it's created equal, so they don't want to give subsidies to oil and gas, and I can understand their argument there, but subsidies for a battery plant, okay. So I think the common ground right now is where we're at, and I don't think that we're aligned as a country and how we're going to move forward. Whether it's with how we're going to protect ourselves, or militarily, or with tariffs. I just don't think that we're aligned, and we're going to have to get aligned pretty quick.
People are in a bubble, though. That's why. Like, I was in a bubble up until, I don't know, 12 years ago, and then because all I concentrated on was working, supporting my family. I didn't concentrate on anything else. I didn't really look into things. And I think that's where a lot of people are at right now. They're in a bubble, and people need to reach out to their families and their friends and start talking about this stuff, because, I was always told at the dinner table, don't bring up politics. Right?
Yep.
And now I'm thinking people are going to have to talk to each other outside of TikTok, outside of YouTube, because people are in a bubble and they're not seeing what's going on. Thanks for answering my question, Blake.
Thanks, Polly. Okay, Joe, I got to get Joe in here. Joe's asking to get in. You had another question there, so Joe, go ahead.
I've got to drop.
Okay,
you betcha.
Thanks. So mine was actually just going back to the religion thing as the other atheist on the panel, not just you, Radical. I wanted to point out something called the Liberty Coalition in Canada, LCC. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or others. LCC is an organization that came from something called the Niagara Declaration around 2020. And this was a collection of about 200 churches that signed the declaration together to form this group that was to try to make changes politically in Canada. And this is something I'd like to point out to people that, we've now got churches that are getting involved politically. And if you haven't seen it, then you haven't been looking in regards to the changes they've been trying to do, whether it be stuff as simple as just, them showing up to abortions and abortion rights, or going to LCC and seeing what kind of work they're doing in regards to legal and supporting. And it brings me to the point of these churches are now participating politically. They should be taxed, because you are now getting involved in there. If you were a church that wasn't being political and just continuing to just do what you do, boo, then there would be an argument there. But if you're getting involved in politics, and these guys are aggressively coming in and becoming politics, we need to bring the idea of taxing the churches. Because if you got enough money to do this stuff, and the stuff that they're doing is a lot of coin, you got enough money to pay your share in regards to this, if you want to have a seat at the table to talk politics.
Totally agree.
Everybody else does.
Totally agree. Okay, Auntie, we'll get you in there, but just before you do, I'm just going to do my plug here, but Just looking at the time here, we're going to have to wrap it up. So, Auntie, I'm going to have your final say on here, and then I'm going to go back up and run down the panel again for everybody's final thoughts. So, Auntie, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. All I will, I'm gonna drop anyway, because I've got to, because it's coming up to 20 to 3 in the morning. But my final thought on this is that left or right, it doesn't matter. At the moment, we are facing an existential crisis, an existential threat to who and what we are as free democratic human beings, whether it be from the corporatocracy, the churches, which are basically one and the same, or fascism in the political sphere. We need to educate as many people as possible. We need to have those family discussions, as Polly said at the dinner table. We need to start talking to our friends and family. But more so, we also need to be prepared to get our hands dirty if we need to. And that means we need to start taking the battle to our streets. We need to start shouting it from the hilltops, shouting it from the streets. And if that means, if you live in a rural area, calling your friends and just saying, look, I'd like to call a town hall meeting and just speaking about this so they can get behind it too, then so be it. The more the merrier. There is no left, there is no right, there is just a future of warfare for us all otherwise. And I just want to thank you, Beaver, for letting me up. I really like listening into your shows that you do. It's very informative and has helped me learn a bit more about my Canadian friends over there, over the proverbial pond. And just want to say thank you for having me up. Really appreciate it.
Auntie, thanks so much for coming up. Like I said, Beaver Politics and my show Radicalized is all about bringing people together in open discussion. So thank you so much from your view from the UK. Super appreciated. I think the entire panel would agree with me, and I think everybody watching would agree with me. But unfortunately, I think we're going to have to slowly start wrapping her up for tonight. So we're going to go back up to the top of the panel here. Frontline, I know you said you had to bail, so maybe we'll get you for a last thought here quick before you got to go.
I never said I had to bail. I think somebody else did.
Yeah, I
Oh,
have to
okay.
bail. It's
Okay.
so if you can drop me, that would help your algorithm. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Auntie. Have a good night.
Thanks, Auntie.
Good night. Take care.
Followed you.
Awesome.
Are we just gonna go
Frontline?
top to bottom?
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I just want to echo what Auntie said. Like, it's really not right versus left. It really isn't. It's top versus bottom because the top is trying to literally take over and create a new age Yalta where the powers that be are going to decide how to carve up our world and are going to dictate how we get to think and feel and the education we're going to have access to, etc. My giant fear around that, though, is that the right doesn't really see it. You know what I mean? Like, you guys know I have a lot of conversations with conservatives, and unfortunately, I feel like a lot of conservatives are just wrapped up in the economy and in isolationism. Like, there's so many of them that just all they focus on. The second you try to bring up anything, they're just going to go back to, oh, $60 billion deficit, and we just need more pipelines, and we need to drill more, and it's we need to be friends with the United States. We need them. It's all about money, 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 without even
Yep.
truly understanding economics. So that's the part that freaks me out the most. And then I also wanted to add about the military spending. Yes, it does need to increase. I do feel like there are ways to do it without completely cutting public programs. I think that if anybody is going to be able to actually do that properly, it's going to be a top economist like Carney. I know that Pierre likes to talk a lot about increasing the military, yet he doesn't give any actual solutions on how to do that. It's just words. It's like, oh yeah, let's put military bases up in the Arctic. Let's increase military spending. How? Where is that money going to come from? And we all know that if that money comes from anywhere, it's going to be from us regular folk on the bottom who are going to have our services cut. And that's unfortunate. And then I also wanted to bring up that, like, if we do look in the past, it's not that big of a difference, but under Harper, he increased military spending from 1.0 of our GDP to 1.1% of our GDP. So basically, he did nothing. It fluctuated the entire time that he was in power. And then Trudeau brought it up from I think Harper's actually went from 1.1% GDP to 1% GDP, and Trudeau's brought it up to 1.3 GDP, 1.3%. So not a big increase, right? We overall we've kind of stayed the same. We definitely need to be doing more. I know that the recent plans that Trudeau worked on, they had estimated that our military spending would reach 1.76% by 2029, but that's still not enough and that's still very far away. So I'm excited to see what Carney's going to put on the table in terms of that. And I hope that, he gets asked those tough questions and can give us some good answers for it. But I'm not confident that Polyev is going to be the guy that's going to be able to lead us through dealing with a complete authoritarian dictatorship down south of the border. Like, I don't trust that. And I don't trust the conservative premiers either. I don't trust Doug Ford because, as he just showed, he's spending tens of millions of dollars on Fox News ads to quote unquote show Americans that we're
Yep.
their best friend. And
Yep.
when he was asked about it by a reporter yesterday, he literally answered with, because they were asking him, like, well, how much exactly did you spend? Because he won't tell anybody, right? And so he's like, oh, I agree that transparency is the most important thing ever, but I don't have an exact figure. Like, come on, right? And we already know Danielle Smith is already in the pockets of Trump. We already know the propaganda that's being spread all over Alberta and how many people that want to become part of the 51st state are actually, people from Alberta because everything is tied into their oil and gas. So I have no confidence that conservatives are the government that's going to be able to get us through this. I wish that they had real plans and real policies that we could look at. But everything that I've seen so far is showing me a lot of weakness in dealing with this. So I guess I'll stop there and I'll let everybody else say their piece. But that's just where I'm at. We have to make good decisions and we have to figure out some way, somehow, even if it takes us a million hours of spending our time debunking misinformation. If that's what we got to do for the rest of our lives, and we got to do it no matter what. We have to. This is literally about our future generations. It's about our own freedoms and basic human rights and decency. So take it away.
As always, well said, well thought out, right to the heart. Blade Rogers, what do you have to say for a final thought here tonight?
Well, our spending has to increase with our military. We're a top 10 economy. I wholeheartedly believe we could be a top 5 economy in the world. I think that that's what we have to offer. I think that beyond that, we just our society. I think that we could be a beacon for the world. We need to pivot. We need to do it fast. I think that this is you can look at it glass half full. This is an opportunity for us because I'm going to tell you, this really shattered my worldview. I was always pro-American, not from the sense that I agreed with everything that they did. It was more from the sense of, well, I'll take U.S. leadership over Chinese or Russian leadership any day. And this is really has me conflicted in changing my worldview, and I don't think that I'm alone. And we're going to have to band together to make it through. We're going to have to find new alliances, and we're going to have to step up. And if we're going to do that, we've got to mend the fences internally in this country.
Yep, I would agree. Thanks very much, Blade. Strong women, sorry you haven't had a chance to get in here. You got in here late, but what do you have to say?
Okay, I need Joe's help. Joe, do you have TikTok up on your computer right now?
Everything up on my computer.
I sent you
So,
message. I sent you 3 messages, and I
okay.
would like you to read out because I copied it and sent it because last night I knew you had it. This is the tweet that Elon Musk has sent out tonight, and I will tell you what else I know after it. And so the reason I want to bring it up is I'm like, how could Canadians possibly want to even think about joining the US? Because tonight I saw, lots of posts like with the Alberta USA hats and everything. But I'm saying this guy is not going to offer anything to Canadians. No job security, nothing that he's talking about. I mean, no one's going to want to join the United States. Anyway, did you get it, Joe?
I've got your message here. So you say this is a tweet he sent out. I'm
Yep.
just going to see if I can find the original tweet of his.
Elon
This way I
Musk
could read
sent it
his.
out on Twitter, on X.
Yeah,
Are you
here it is.
talking about the one that he sent to all the federal workers?
Yes, but
Yes.
my point is it has a deadline by 11:59 on Monday, and think about the people who don't go on X.
Oh, I know.
Consistent with Donald Trump's instructions, all federal employees will receive an email requesting to understand what they got done last week. Failure to respond will be taken as resignation.
And they have till Monday at 11:59. So the government sent out to their employees that they need to compile a list of all the items that they were working on last week.
Okay, so
This
if you're
reminds
American
me.
watching the show, you need to pay particular attention right here, right now. Strong women, can you repeat that one more time? So everybody who is American and watching this, you need to listen to this right now.
Joe, I don't know if you can find the actual tweet. Did you find it? I
I
copied
did.
it.
I did.
I can
I
quickly
did.
talk about it if you guys need me to. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay,
so I'm just
Frontline, throw it out there.
Okay, so the tweet is just saying that the emails are going to go out, but the main story is the fact that there's emails going out to all federal workers saying that they are to respond with 5 bullet points as to what they accomplished last week and CC their manager. And if they don't respond, they're going to consider it a resignation.
and they have the deadline is Monday at 11:59 p.m. And I don't know, like, yes, it's going out to people, but I don't know if they check their emails or what's happening. But think about that type of government. So I'm thinking about you're trying to tell people we're going to boost the economy, but you're firing people from jobs. You're looking for ways to get rid of all those employees. Like, I don't understand. They're going to implode themselves
But
because
isn't that the conservative way in a nutshell? Because they take the approach that, much like you manage, let's say, your credit card finances, when you rack up your credit card, you think, well, if I cut here and if I cut here and if I cut here, I can pay this off. Now, government doesn't really work like financing your credit card, and yet every conservative government has run on this type of policy that if we cut enough, it'll all work out in the end. And yet, for some reason, people keep going back to that formula and expecting different results.
Yeah, I just saw it tonight and I thought, wow, there's a lot of layers to, Elon putting out that tweet. Like, you're putting out federal government instructions on Twitter, like on
Yep,
X, whatever you
It's
want
the
to
yep.
call
weekend.
it. And you're
It's the
doing
weekend.
it where you're doing it with an at the real Donald Trump. Like, you're not even in, like,
Strong woman, do you mind if I just add something to what you're saying there?
of course.
The one thing I'm going to say is, and I think that this is really going to shift the momentum in the United States, and this is going to be the downfall of Donald Trump. Like all these Doge firings, they're starting to fire U.S. veterans, people that fought for their country, whether they're soldiers or first responders and whatnot. And I thought it was really telling when you have a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, like Jesse Waters, who went on Fox News and said, listen, I have a friend of mine, a veteran that was affected by this, and he actually spoke out. I think that this is going to be combined with the Ukraine issue. It's really going to be the issues that are going to spell the downfall of Donald Trump. And because he's making enemies everywhere, because he's not smart enough to do anything gradually or one thing at a time to enact this change. He's just an agent of chaos. And when you start affecting veterans and firing them, that's his base. That and that's the rah like the U.S. base that he claims that he has. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to
but
put that out
exactly
there.
that brings me to my point. Was before I joined, and when you were talking about the military, I'm like, how are you going to get people to take up your cause if like people, Americans, are not going to want to take up the cause because there's nothing to fight for, because they already don't have their basics. They're going to be stripped from everything that they were promised. So they're like, what am I I'm fighting your battles for nothing. I'm not getting anything out of it. You haven't given me cheaper food, and you haven't pressed forward and told me my gas is cheaper. So far I can't build anything because I have tariffs on my aluminum and steel. I have lumber. I can't build with that because I'm going to have tariffs on that next. Like, you're not giving me anything to fight for because you're taking everything to the bare bones. So you haven't shown me anything. How's that going to happen?
Okay.
Can I?
I'm just
Okay.
going to throw this out there quick, and then I'm going to go to Paul. I'll frontline throw in, and then I'll go to Paulie next. We haven't heard from Paulie in a while, but one of the things that I have been saying for a while, I've been asking the question, why is the Republican Party so willing to put information out into the public sphere that they know fundamentally is damaging to their base? Now, there's only two ways that they can approach this. They either figure that their base is so brainwashed that they can get away with it, which to some extent is absolutely true. But the other part of it is, and what more I believe, they're willing to put it out there because their course of action is already predetermined. This will end in military lockdown at some point. So, Frontline, go ahead, and then Paulie will get to you.
Two things. Number one is you have to understand how young men get introduced into the army, like the Marines. They get brainwashed from a very, very, very young age to listen to whatever they get told by their leader, no matter who their leader is. It is a sort of brainwashing that you can't even wrap your own mind around right now. So there are a lot of military servants who are going to listen to whatever Donald Trump wants. Number two, I can almost guarantee that there will be I guess we could call it maybe like a false flag operation or some sort of. Do you guys remember when, for those of you that know your German history, the Reichstag,
Yep, Reichstag
right?
fire, yep.
So they're going to do something very similar in America so they can enforce martial law, so that people can't do anything to rise up, so that they can't do anything to protest. Everything is already in the process of this right now. What happened with Elon Musk and him having his, security personnel deputized, what happened with how they are getting rid of the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database. All of these things are being done right now, and all of this is part of Project 2025. So,
yep.
I understand how you're like, how can they do this? The people won't ever have it. Why is everybody just laying back and taking it? You have to realize that a lot of these people are actually deathly scared for their lives. How does Putin control power in Russia? His political opponents have been either jailed or unalived.
If I was in Russia, I wouldn't go
Trump
near a window.
Finishes out his term. I don't think Trump finishes out his term. And you see a lot of these sycophants that are up there, they look like they're hostages.
Trump's not the only one. Trump's not the end game. Trump is just a tool in the entire purpose of this.
Yes. The end game is the multipolarization of the earth. So the multipolar, Russia having Europe, United States basically having all of North America, China having all of Asia. But there's
Yep.
there's Putin is huge. But the thing with Putin you have to realize is that they're not necessarily working together. Trump owes Putin. Trump owes him a lot.
Yep.
He has to do whatever he gets told. Putin thinks he's a joke. He's been used, and that's what they do. They go out into different countries and they figure out who is somebody that's easily manipulated, that's also incredibly narcissistic and hungry for power. They found Trump back in the 80s. Like at the end of the 80s is when they started working with him. And when they found him, and they started doing him favors so that they could blackmail him into doing whatever he wants. Then the Silicon Valley tech bros did the same thing. They bought Trump because they want to create their own autonomous zones in the United States where they are the rulers of each autonomous zone that they build. And they don't care about the population. They don't care about anybody else. For themselves, the other people can just get unalived and they wouldn't even care. So it's not, Trump is actually not the scary one. The scary one is Musk and JD Vance and Putin. They are the most dangerous ones. Trump is just a puppet right now. That's it. And if we don't look at what the other guys are doing, we will never understand the full picture of what's happening.
And this is why I'm in Ontario. I just want to say one quick thing. This is why I'm so damn mad about that Starlink that Doug Ford just went on. Like, these are the types of deals that he's doing. He's got to cut that and say no and get rid of it. We don't want any tie to that guy.
Yep.
Sorry.
Paulie, do you want to jump in there?
Say that we canceled the F-35.
Yeah. So, Paulie, can you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm just getting, there's people on here from the US that are now saying that Canadians are, they're turning against us a lot of, quite a few on TikTok here. And I just want people to know that we fought for them in Afghanistan, right? We fought for them. We didn't have to.
Yeah.
And we did. We joined them and we fought for them. My husband fought. He got injured in Afghanistan. He has lost the use of his left arm. Yeah, it's just sad that they're turning on us like this. And people are like, don't blame all Americans, but the ones that voted for Trump, maybe duped or not, and then the ones that didn't vote at all.
Yep.
Yeah,
there's a lot of them.
When you don't vote.
There's a lot of them, and yeah, I mean, what do you say? I've said on more than a few occasions, the people that sit by and do nothing, you're always going to have each side of the spectrum covered. It's the people in the middle that always decide which way that balance is going to go. And unfortunately, with the misinformation campaigns, the middle is as confused as anybody else is, and ultimately that is on purpose. My personal belief is if they had military control, we would already have military lockdown in the States. So I'm going to have to cut her off here for tonight, guys. So what I'm going to do is have everybody everyone's got 30 seconds, but I just want to throw out there for everybody just joining the show, thanks very much for stopping in. The show is Radicalized here on the Beaver Politics Network. I wanted to thank everybody that came onto the show tonight and everybody that's joining in. Remember, tapping is clapping, sharing is caring. We appreciate you coming by. Beaver Politics is all about knowledge through discourse. So thanks very much for tuning in. So Frontline, last thought for the night.
Sorry, we're going to go top to bottom again?
Yep.
Okay. Quickly then, for the next 30 seconds, all I'm going to talk about is keep your eyes peeled tomorrow on the German elections, because they are going to give us a little bit of a hint of maybe what's to come. Because if by any crazy means, if only in a crazy way, like if the AFD gets voted in, We know that those elections are not fair, and we know that none of the elections in Europe or Canada are going to be fair. If they don't win, which that's more likely going to happen, is that they won't win, then maybe we can at least celebrate that, because it will be a big celebration, because the AFD has an insane amount of support, more than they should ever have, even though they're not even though they're not first in the polls. The fact that they're second is still something for us to be really mindful of and be really careful of. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled tomorrow. Wish them luck, and hopefully we will not see the AFD as Germany's leadership, because then we're in trouble.
Yep. Thank you. Bolt Blade, last thought for the night?
I think we got to be careful about when we say what's fair and what's not fair, because that was Donald Trump's narrative. But I'll leave it at that. But I think we got to cancel Starlink. I think we got to cancel the F-35, which I wasn't in favor of the first time. But things have changed, and I wouldn't be against some type of a European alliance and having French and British forces on our soil to help protect us. Controversial, but I'm gonna put that out there.
I hear you. Thanks very much, Blade. Strong Women, what's your final thoughts for the evening?
My final thought is I am in Ontario. We're going into our election on Thursday. Everybody should vote. A no vote is a vote. That goes to Doug Ford. Of course, everybody knows about smart voting. Really, I urge people to look at their current MPP and see what they have done. Okay? Don't think about Doug Ford. If it's a PC MPP, look at their resume. Okay, do you want to hire them back? In my particular city, town, I have an MPP since 2016, and he's basically a cheerleader. If he gets reelected, I'll be buying him new blue and white pom-poms. That's all he does. He's like, go Dougie. That's it. So vote, vote, vote. Okay, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Strong Women, and absolutely everybody out there in Ontario, if you're listening in, we cannot stress enough how important getting out to the polls, getting out there and voting, doing your civic duty. You don't have a lot of obligations in a country like Canada, but I really strongly feel like voting is one of them. Get out there, do your duty, vote. Freedom always has a cost. Joe, what's your final thought for the evening?
Final thought, I think, is to extend on exactly as Frontline Feminist was saying. For tomorrow, take a look at the German election. And after that, keep looking in regards to Trump to what he's going to say. He's a tool, he's a puppet, but he is also the messenger. And if you read what he's saying, it's going to give you a bit of a telegraphing as to what they're planning on doing at that particular time. Keep an eye on how much rhetoric he's going to be continuing in regards to Canada. It'll give you an idea. Once he starts, he's right now just still on just the 51st state, 53rd state. Once he starts characterizing Canada as the demon, the evil, or anything else in such as they are the problem, that's when we need to start getting concerned. Because that's when he's trying to get his people to understand whatever move he's going to do is going to be somehow justified.
Yep. Well said, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Polly, what's your final thought for the evening?
Everybody get out and vote. We need to dump the US right now. We need to not depend on them anymore. We have to find our alliances elsewhere and our trade elsewhere. And we need to get rid of Starlink. It needs to be banned from Canada. Or he'll hold it over our heads too.
Absolutely.
And thanks for having me up.
Thanks for coming in. Always appreciate it. So, final thought for myself for the evening. I want to put this out there for any of the conservative viewers that are watching tonight. And I know at times some of the things that have come up have probably made your blood seethe. But I really want everybody to understand that what we all inherently want as human beings are not that much different, whether you're from the right or from the left. We want bodily autonomy. We want to be able to determine our own course in life. We want the stability of home and clothing. We want the stability for our children of education and jobs. Across the spectrum, no matter who you talk to, no matter what part of the world, I think we could all agree that that is something that we are all after. What we disagree on is how those things come about. But the fact that there is a base to stand on should tell you that there is some hope with some even of the worst of what we think of the right, that there is some hope of negotiating and them understanding where we're coming from and meeting in the middle for the betterment of everyone and everywhere. I want to thank my panel for coming in. I want to thank everybody for joining in and catching the show tonight. I'll be back here. I am Mr. Radical. I'll be back here at 6 o'clock next Saturday. But you can catch Beaver Politics all through the week, 7 days a week now, including Sundays. Yes, even Sundays. It's all there for you. Thanks very much to the panel. Good night, everybody. And thanks for being here. We'll catch
Have a
you
good
on the
night.
other side.